Hello YouTube, Dave here again. For this week's discussion-based video, I want to talk about campaigns, and specifically when it comes to running campaigns as a DM, do you prefer to do homebrewed campaigns, or do you prefer running pre-written campaigns? So I find this kind of an interesting topic. I know that my personal preferences have changed over the years, so I'm going to go a little bit over sort of my history, the evolution of how I've come to run campaigns. And we'll, at the end, we'll kind of open it up, and hopefully, you guys will have some awesome. You always do. You always have some really great comments to leave. So I look forward to that. But let's start off with my own personal history of how I started running campaigns. So when I first started, I was in high school, and I found that I had a lot of time to kind of work on stuff. I didn't have a job at that point. I didn't really want to work while I was in school, so I basically, would spend my free time, and probably time that I should have been spending on homework, working on D&D campaigns. And I'm going to be honest, some of them, especially the early ones, were really rough, because I didn't know what I was doing. I would drop a dungeon, and that was fine, and I would make up NPCs because I didn't have a Monstrous manual for 2nd edition. So I would make up, my own enemies for them to face. And, I spent a lot of time doing that, and I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, but I didn't know what I was doing yet. So I didn't really have any, overarching plots. I was just kind of going from dungeon to dungeon, town to town, stuff like that. As time went on, I got a little bit better at trying to actually tell a story. And, for years in 3rd edition, 3.0 into 3.5, everything again that I ran was 100% homebrewed, I guess you could say. Even up into including the worlds that they were in, even though I was really bad at naming things. So I tended just not to have towns. It's like, the nearest city or the next town, or it was rough. I mean, so names are not my strong point. I'm really bad at them. So I started running in the Forgotten Realms because I had the campaign setting, and I really liked it. But I was still making my own stories in that setting. When 3.5 came out, I ran a campaign where the basic concept was that the god Grimish, the god of orcs, and the orc pantheon, because Forgotten Realms had a whole pantheon of gods, all those different separate gods used to be one powerful entity who waged a war in the ancient Netherese days and lost. And as part of the punishment for what this god had done, his personality was fragmented into several different aspects, and that became the orc gods. And the god Il-Naval, who's sort of like the god of battle and strategy, discovered this and decided that he wanted to become that divine being again. And the only way to do that was to slay the other gods in the pantheon and absorb their divine energy. As this happened, the orcs became more aggressive, and he wanted to go back to conquering all of Faerun. And the campaign revolved around that kind of premise, and there were other side stories going on with undead, and it was actually a really busy campaign. There was a lot of different things going on, and I ran that for probably a year and a half, all said. And I never got to finish it. That's the one regret that I have, is I was so close to finishing it, but it just got to the point where work schedules and something else I'm going to talk about here shortly kind of set in. So I never got to finish that. I also eventually started running a campaign set in Eberron, which again, I was pretty close to finishing, but it just couldn't quite get there. And the reason that I couldn't quite get there was DM burnout. And that's, I find, is a very serious thing that can happen, especially when you're, writing your own campaign week in and week out. I just got to the point where I just didn't have the mental energy to continue writing stuff. I just kind of hit that wall, and I just didn't enjoy it anymore. I used to love designing dungeons, but it reached the point where I had done so many of these adventures and scenarios and stuff like that that I just lost interest. I just couldn't do it anymore. I was working long hours. I was, not sleeping a lot. I was just, I was mentally exhausted, physically exhausted, and just burnt out on running stuff. And I took a little bit of a break, actually, after that Eberron game kind of fizzled out. And after that, what I ended up deciding was I wanted to try running a pre-written campaign and see how that went. And the first pre-written campaign that I ran was the Shackled City, put out by Paizo Publishing in Dungeon Magazine. Now they eventually released this hardcover, which is amazing, and I ended up running this, and it was actually the first campaign that I got to finish all the way through. So I went through all the adventures, all the chapters, and actually concluded the campaign, and it was an awesome feeling. I felt really rewarded having finished that story, and the players really enjoyed it. And it was just a great thing. Like the campaign went super well. Everybody was interested. Everybody was into it. And it was, again, just really rewarding to say, this is basically what happens to the characters after the story had concluded, because they were 21st level by the time that they fought Atamarcus. So it was really awesome, and it's like, well, that went so well. The next campaign had been fully published in the magazine by that point as well, which was the Age of Worms. And I loved the Age of Worms even before I started to run it, because it revolved around undead. It had, Dragotha, the Dracolich in it, Caius, the god. Just revolved really heavily around undead. And again, I love that stuff. Like, I really love undead. So it's like, I'm going to be running this campaign as well. And I ran that one as well, and again, it concluded, it finished. I got to do everything that I wanted to do in that campaign, and it was rewarding and it was fun, but it felt like there was something a little bit missing from that one. And the main reason is, with Shackled City, many of the adventures, even though there is this storyline that connects them kind of behind the scenes, with Age of Worms, everything is, like it's a straight line. And even though the story is fantastic, the player characters, everything that they do feels like it's part of the story, instead of having all these different things that they're doing that feel unrelated but actually are. And one of my players had actually kind of said that at the end, is that, I really enjoyed the story, but I felt like, the characters didn't really have a chance to do anything else. So with that in mind, it kind of brings me to the way that I run campaigns now. I tried a couple of other homebrewed campaigns after that. I did one in 4th edition, for example. I did one in 4th edition that ended up kind of fizzling out as well. And again, part of that was just DM burnout. From that point forward, when 5th edition came out and I started buying into it, I looked at the fact that they're releasing mainly just campaigns. I decided that I was going to use those. I'm going to try to run as many of those as I can, because, well, for one, I'm buying them and they're not necessarily the cheapest things in the world, but I found that I've had the most success with pre-written campaigns. That said, I try to find things to do in these campaigns now that I can interject a little bit of my own stuff into it. So for example, I'm currently running Curse of Strahd and Out of the Abyss. Now, Out of the Abyss so far is being run pretty much as the book has it, because it's still the very early phases of that campaign. But with the Curse of Strahd, I've had a chance to do some stuff that's different. So I started off, if you watch my Session 1 recap video, I started off with an encounter that wasn't part of the actual book. It was just an encounter with goblins. It was meant to be something that was kind of lighthearted and fun, give the player characters a chance to kind of do something together, kind of work together, because this was a group that was playing together for the first time. And I just wanted to give them something kind of fun to do. And I wanted them to have something that was a different tone from what the rest of the campaign basically was going to be. And so that encounter went over really well. They went through a modified version of the Death House adventure. So if you watch the Session 2 video, you'll see kind of how that concluded and the differences between how I ran it and the book. So I made changes there, but I still ran more or less a lot of what was in the story. But when they finished that, they ended up leaving Barovia. They ended up leaving, the Ravenloft setting, because it hadn't fully crossed over yet. So the player characters had the ability, the boundaries were weak enough that they were able to leave. The plot hook that I really want to use with that one was the one where they encounter the Vallaki gypsies that are camping outside of Daggerford. And the premise behind that is that the player characters are heroes of Daggerford. So I wanted to, instead of just saying, well, off screen you've done these things and, you become these heroes, I wanted to actually act that out. So I created 3 different scenarios, One involving bandits, one involving orcs that have been seen in the nearby area, and one involving some wolves that have become more aggressive than they usually have been. So there are three different adventures, three different little scenarios that I ended up running over the course of the next couple of sessions. And again, it was something that I enjoyed writing those little scenarios, and I had fun doing those. But I don't know at this point in time that I'd be able to expand that into a full-on campaign, especially one that's run semi-regularly. It's just a matter of time, energy. I'm not in my 20s anymore. I'm in getting into my mid-30s now. I have a family, we have a child, so it's really hard to find the time to kind of write stuff out now, other than a little bit of little scenarios kind of here and there that I can throw in, which is how I want to run things from now on. Like, I'm going to run pretty much pre-written campaigns for the foreseeable future. I don't see a point where I'm going to go back to homebrewed campaigns personally, but I'm going to try to find ways to interject my own stories and adventures into these campaigns. So with Out of the Abyss, the player characters basically go through several different areas, locations, before they finally make it back to the surface. And then when they make it back to the surface, they're called back into the Underdark. And I want there to be more of a break, so I'm going to have the player characters, basically in my campaign, emerge from the Underdark a little bit earlier, have a couple of adventures on the surface that are completely unrelated. However, things that they experience in the Underdark are going to start to affect things on the surface by the end of those scenarios, and then that's when they're going to get called back into the Underdark to investigate everything. So that's how I basically plan on doing it from here on out. So I guess the question that I have is, how do you guys prefer to run your campaigns? Do you enjoy running pre-written adventures? If you do you run them basically by the book, or do you use them as a loose guideline, like I kind of have started to do? Or do you prefer doing nothing but homebrew campaigns? I do, I guess, have a homebrew campaign that I am technically running, but it's a series of one-shots with friends of mine from the town that I grew up in when I get to visit there, which is usually only once or twice a year. So it's easier to plan for something that's only once a year than something that's every week or every 2 weeks. And I guess that also goes with how often do you game. Do you game regularly enough that you experience burnout if you do try to do pre-written stuff? Or are there large enough gaps that it gives you the time that you need? So let me know what you guys do, because again, I love your guys' comments. Everything that's been commented on all of these discussion videos have been, fantastic. And when it comes to running games, I mean, there's no wrong answer. Like a lot of other things. There's just no wrong answer. If you and your group love the pre-written campaigns and you get satisfaction out of running them, then that's awesome. And if you prefer coming up with your own stuff, then again, that's also awesome, and I have ultimate respect for you, because as many times as I've tried it, and as close as I've gotten to wrapping things up, I just find that eventually the mental reserves just kind of run dry. I get burnt out, and I need to take a break. So again, let me know what you guys do, and I look forward to all of your comments. Again, I have a few other suggestions for videos I'm going to be doing as far as these discussion topics go. But please, if you have any ideas for future videos that you'd like to see, please comment those below as well, because I'm always looking for more ideas from you guys, because the ones that you've given me so far have been awesome. So thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I look forward to reading your comments, and we'll see you next time.